Continuing with this line of questioning, our next candidate, Kelly Ayotte.
Kelly, would you support legislation to abolish the United States Department of Education, and if so, why?
I would not abolish the department altogether. However, it would be the department I would start with, along with energy, to review, and I think there has to be some significant cuts to the Department of Education, because fundamentally, having talked to school boards here in New Hampshire and as a parent, they've added so many layers of bureaucracy as a result of the Federal Department of Education that has not focused on getting a better education for students, because that happens at a local level. So I think that that is an agency that has to be scaled back, and I would support that. And I also, too, support school choice. I support homeschooling and charter schools. I've spoken to charter school students and seen the wonderful stories of people who have succeeded. And when there's competition in schools, we see what happens, and we understand when parents get to choose, that parents are able to make the best decisions for their kids.
And candidate Jim Binder, would you support abolishing the U.S. Department of Education? Please explain your answer.
Well, I think at a minimum it needs to be terrifically downsized. Once again, we could go back to the Constitution. You'd say, why is there a Department of Education? Why is there a Department of Energy? Why is there a Department of Agriculture? In the case of the Department of Agriculture, we now have more members, we have more federal employees in the Department of Agriculture than we have farm owners in America. When I was in graduate school, the Department of Energy was all fit into one building. It was 1 year old back in 1978. James Schlesinger was the Energy Secretary. And it's since grown to 110,000 employees with a $24 billion budget. And its charter is to reduce American dependence on foreign oil. So those are two examples of federal agencies that have gotten completely out of hand. Now, I'd say the Department of Education is a candidate to be eliminated. But before I just take that simple solution, we've had it for a long time, I would first apply this test. And this is a test that we apply when we're doing turnarounds. What are the essential things for our country that you accomplished last year? What did you do that you're the best person to do? And how much should that have cost us? Now let's compare that organization to the one we've got and see if we can migrate this gigantic Department of Education back towards something more reasonable and push responsibilities as far down into the communities and states as we possibly can. And that's what I intend to do with every branch of the government, starting with my U.S. Senate office. We are spending twice as much today as we were 10 years ago. That simply has to stop. But every organization takes its behavioral cues from the people at the top, which is the two ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, the executive branch and the legislative branch. So if we're going to ask our federal government to make the kinds of sacrifices that they're going to need to make, it has to start with us in the Congress. So I will run the smallest, leanest Senate office, and I will challenge every other senator to do the same. One of the reasons I'll be able to do that is because I favor term limits. And you know, I think that half the people in these Senate offices and congressional offices are there to perpetuate the ruling class. If you don't have to do that, you can really downsize it. But if we're going to ask our whole federal government to get leaner, and get leaner by a lot, they have to see that those in the Senate and the Congress and the executive branch are also getting their parts of the government leaner. So that's what I'm going to do.
And now, candidate, same question.
I do believe that the Department of Education has too many people working in it. In fact, I think that government just about everywhere across every department has too many people working in it.
Please hold your applause.
Yeah. And of course the operative word is working. There are 2.1 million people, civilians, working in federal government today. And as a United States Senator, I would focus on having a lot fewer at the end of my 12-year term that I agree to serve as 2 terms only, including the Department of Education. There are some things the Department of Education does. For those of you who have some college-age kids, I went through college on a Pell Grant at a time when that was provided by the federal government. I appreciate it. It made the difference between me being a college grad and not. So it'd be disingenuous for me to stand up here and say, blow the whole thing up. I was the beneficiary of that, and I'm forever thankful. I paid that back, and I was glad to do it in the form of higher taxes when I graduated as a result of what I did. So no, I don't believe that the Board of Education the Department of Education should be completely changed and blown up, but I do think it should be dramatically smaller. And I think that what we need to do, by the way, in that school that I was telling you about, the George Jackson Academy, I'd like to tell you one very quick story. One of the things that we introduced into that school was right and wrong. Now, it's funny when you start a school with a Jesuit priest, and I'm a Presbyterian, and there was a lot of funny discussions, I can tell you, over a few beers about how we were going to run the school. What we agreed on was a right and a wrong. And on the third day, a little boy came into the headmaster's room, and he put his lock on the teacher's desk, on the headmaster's desk, and he said, "Sir, I don't need my lock anymore because I understand right from wrong." And within a week, 80% of the boys in that school handed in their locks, and that school today is largely run without locks on lockers. That's the kind of thing that we need to introduce back into our schools, and that happens at the kitchen table, not at the conference table. Thank you.
And candidate, Norman.
May I have the... Okay. May I have the question again, please?
The question is, would you support legislation to abolish the U.S. Department of Education? And please explain your answer.
You've heard the other answers. This is mine. Yes. I've been there in the state education department. I've been fighting for quality education. The federal government has gotten in the way of quality education around the country. Jimmy Carter's administration put in place the Department of Education. How many people here think that the quality of our elementary and secondary education is better today than it was when the Department of Education was enacted and created? Let the record reflect not a hand went up. Because you know, and I know in your heart and from your experience, that federal government control of education does not work. It doesn't work. Now, there are some things the federal government has committed to the states. For example, special education. In 1975, Congress passed the IDEA. And what they did there was they said for any state that would participate, it was voluntary, Congress committed to pay 50% of special education costs. Has the government ever paid 50% of the special education costs to New Hampshire or any other state? The answer is no. We don't need bureaucrats to administer money. We need a block grant for special education costs back to the states. And a computer can do it. We don't need a bureaucracy that's bloated, a bureaucracy that looks to perpetuate more bureaucracy at the state and local level. I believe in the people at the local level. That's where education quality is going to be determined, not in Washington. I'm the only candidate that you heard tonight who said I would abolish the Department of Education. Thank you.